Coming up today, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe fails to acknowledge Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women during his historic speech to a joint session of the US Congress. Despite the swirling allegations of bribery involving several of its senior members, Korea's ruling Saenuri Party secures victory in Wednesday's byelections, winning 3 of the 4 seats up for grabs. The main opposition party fails to win any. Plus, the US Federal Reserve says there will be no imminent rate hike after data shows the US economy slowed sharply over the winter. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Thursday, the 30th of April. You're tuned into our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thanks ever so much for joining us. I'm Mark Broome. We start with Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's much-anticipated speech to the US Congress. And despite pressure from inside and outside of the United States, Abe again chose to ignore calls for him to apologize directly for Japan's wartime sexual enslavement of women. While he shirked that responsibility, Abe did say Japan brought suffering to Asia and offered sympathy for the American lives lost during World War II. Geunhye has more.
There was no shift in his stance. During a 45-minute speech to a joint meeting of the U.S. and Senate at the U.S. Congress on Wednesday, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed deep remorse over his country's role in World War II, but stopped short of offering a clear apology for such atrocities as the sexual enslavement of women from Korea, China, and other nations.
Our actions brought suffering to the peoples in Asian countries.
Focusing more on the future of the U.S.-Japan military alliance than Tokyo's past wrongdoings, Abe did not use any apologetic expressions during his landmark speech. Instead, he said that armed conflicts have always made women suffer the most. The remark is being seen as an attempt to make sexual slavery look like just one of many human rights violations that happened during war. It was a clear contrast with the apologetic tone Abe struck about U.S. suffering during the war.
I offer, with profound respect, my eternal condolences to the souls of all American people that were lost during World War II.
Many critics had urged Abe to use the speech to make a public apology about Japan's wartime atrocities to alleviate concerns that he is trying to dilute past official statements of remorse by his predecessors. The absence of an apology is expected to cast a shadow over the prospect of Seoul-Tokyo ties improving anytime soon. Geunhye, Arirang News.
Now, as for the US State Department's response to Abe's lack of apology, a spokesperson noted the Japanese Prime Minister said his cabinet would uphold the 1993 Kono Statement, which acknowledged the country's sexual enslavement of women during World War II. Seoul-based Yonhap news agency contacted the department with questions about Abe's US Congress address on Wednesday. The official, who asked not to be named, also affirmed that Washington's stance on Japan's wartime trafficking of women for sexual purposes remains unchanged. It's still considered an egregious violation of human rights. The United States and Japan have reportedly agreed on the need to hold trilateral defense talks with South Korea. Tokyo-based Kyodo news agency reports that the agreement was reached during a meeting in Washington between U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter and his Japanese counterpart, Gen Nakatani. Stressing the importance of cooperating with Seoul when dealing with North Korean missile and nuclear threats, Nakatani is said to have suggested holding three-way talks at next month's Shangri-La Defense Dialogue in Singapore, to which Carter responded positively. The report adds Washington and Tokyo are planning on enhancing trilateral defense cooperation in areas like anti-piracy and disaster relief operations. Now back here in Korea, and it was a tale of two very different stories for Korea's two biggest political parties in Wednesday's by-elections. The ruling party surprised many by sweeping to victory in 3 of the 4 vacant seats. The main opposition party is left licking its wounds after failing to win a single race. Park Ji-won reports.
It was a surprise victory for the ruling Saenuri Party. The Conservative Party ended up winning 3 of the 4 parliamentary seats up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections. A Liberal independent candidate took the remaining seat. It was a night to forget for the main opposition party, which failed to secure a single victory, even in its traditional stronghold districts. Seoul's Gwanak-B, a traditional liberal hotbed, was won by the ruling Saenuri Party's Oh Shin-hwan with over 43% of the vote. The liberal vote was split with the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy's Chung Tae-ho earning some 34%, while independent Chung Dong-young, who used to be a key man in the main opposition party, finished with more than 20% of the votes. Jungwon District in Seongnam, Gyeonggi-do Province went to the ruling Saenuri Party's Shin Sang-jin in an easy victory. He locked down more than 55% of the votes, while the main opposition's Chung Hwan-seok could only muster 35%. In Incheon's Ganghwa-B district, the Saenuri Party candidate An Sang-soo, former Incheon mayor, beat the NPAD's Shin Dong-gun 54% to 42%. The nightmare was complete when the NPAD also lost in Gwangju's Seoggu-B district, a constituency which has been in the Liberal Party's hands for 13 straight elections. Independent Chun Jung-bae, former justice minister during the Roh Moo-hyun administration, took more than 52% of the votes. The final voter turnout stood at 36%. That includes ballots cast during a 2-day early voting period last weekend, and it's slightly higher than the 33% turnout in last July's by-elections. The rise in turnout has been attributed to the extra interest sparked by the recent bribery scandal. The 4 seats were mainly vacated by the dissolution of the pro-North Korea Unified Progressive Party late last year. The newly elected lawmakers will have 1 year in the job until the general elections next April. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
And staying on the response to the elections, President Park Geunhye says the results reflect the public's desire for an end to political strife and a clear mandate for the government and National Assembly. In a statement read by her spokesperson, the president said she will honor voter wishes by bringing life back to the economy and by carrying out reforms, including updates to public employee pensions. With the ruling party's sweeping victory and in light of the recent bribery scandal, President Park is expected to make a further push to eradicate political corruption. She may also press forward with an investigation into 2 pardons the former Roh Moo-hyun administration granted to now deceased businessman Song Wan-jong, whose alleged bribery list prompted the current graft probe. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is at a crossroads following its crushing defeat in Wednesday's by-elections. The party has been left to ponder its future after it failed to make any impression on voters despite the ruling party being embroiled in that recent bribery list scandal. Ji Myung-gil has more.
Opposition leader Moon Jae-in took responsibility for the NPAD's spectacular failure to win any of the 4 National Assembly seats that were up for grabs in Wednesday's by-elections.
I don't blame anyone. I will reflect upon my shortcomings and start over again. I'll try to bring about greater reform and unification.
Disillusioned members of the party are demanding a complete overhaul of the NPAD's policy agenda. They are also expected to push for ways to resolve the internal power struggle between those loyal to former President Roh Moo-hyun on the one side and Kim Dae-jung on the other. Moon Jae-in's leadership is also coming under intense scrutiny, adding to the sense of crisis within the party. The party lost on its home turf of Gwangju and the traditionally left-leaning Seoul district of Gwanak-bi, leading some to say the MPD has lost its identity as an opposition party. Moon, who lost in the 2012 race to President Park Geun-hye, was being touted as a potential liberal candidate for the 2017 presidential election. But Wednesday's embarrassing loss has put a major dent in his hopes of running for the top job again. On the flip side, the chief of the ruling Saenuri Party, Kim Moo-sung, has cemented his leadership and raised his status as a potential presidential candidate in 2 years' time. Despite the bribery allegations swirling around some of its senior members, the ruling Saenuri Party's impressive performance has given it a mandate to push ahead with its reform drives and economic initiatives.
We urgently need to pass economic-related bills and reform the pension system for public workers. By doing this, we'll be able to pass on a strong and fiscally sound country to the future generations.
The Saenuri Party's victory is also expected to help President Park tighten her grip on state affairs and aid the administration in its push to fight corruption. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
Now to the latest on the aftermath of Saturday's devastating earthquake in Nepal, and humanitarian aid has begun to reach remote mountain regions close to the epicenter of the 7.8 magnitude tremor. The United Nations said on Wednesday that the response is broadening to include some of the worst-hit villages where landslides have strained rescue efforts. The quake has killed over 5,200 people, although the death toll is likely to rise. It's injured twice as many as that and has left tens of thousands of people homeless. International aid workers have criticized Nepal's government for its slow and uncoordinated response to this humanitarian disaster. Locals are also voicing their frustration with protesters clashing with police in the capital Kathmandu on Wednesday. Meanwhile, rescue workers continue to search for survivors who may still be trapped under the debris. The much talked about rate increase by the US Federal Reserve could be further away than many had anticipated. Wrapping up a two-day policy meeting in Washington, the Fed didn't signal any shift from its current policy, just saying that it will raise its record low interest rates when it is reasonably confident inflation is moving towards 2%. Now, analysts say the statement suggests the Fed won't look to raise rates until September at the very earliest. The Fed statement came hot on the heels of a disappointing government data report which said the country's GDP expanded just 0.2% in the first 3 months of the year, well down from a 2.2% increase in the fourth quarter of last year. The slowdown has been blamed on the harsh winter weather, falling global crude prices, slower hiring and the rising dollar. The Fed's interest rates have been near 0% since late 2008. Korea's industrial output shrank in March from the previous month, pulled down by a sharp decline in electronics and steel products. Data from Statistics Korea shows production across all sectors fell 0.6% in March from a month earlier. The agency attributes the decline to a high base effect in the previous month, when output actually rose 2.2%, as well as increased overseas production of key electronic parts. Now, people living here in Korea love to see red numbers on the calendar, as it means a public holiday is on the horizon. And there's a big holiday coming up towards the end of next month. And it's more than just a day off for Buddhists. Preparations are already underway for Buddha's birthday. Our Connie Kim reports.
When it's your 2,559th birthday, the celebrations begin early. Buddha's birthday takes place in a few weeks on May 25th, but the celebration committee kicked off festivities on Wednesday, lighting up this replica of a pagoda in central Seoul. The committee also invited international students to take part in the ceremonies.
I have an experience in temple stay, and it really was so nice. So I decided to participate in this Buddhist festival.
The Chogesa Temple in Seoul is an important site in a country where 20% of the population is Buddhist. With the celebration just around the corner, members of the Buddhist community are busy cleaning the temples and putting up colorful lanterns. The lanterns are only up for a few weeks, but it takes the volunteers all year to make them, drawing the designs and painting them by hand.
This year, we try to include symbols of Buddhism, such as instruments and bells used in rituals.
Over 100,000 lotus lanterns will adorn the streets of Seoul, building up to the Lantern Festival starting May 16th, and various birthday events will take place across the country. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
And those are the stories we have for you at this hour. For more, you can check out our website, arirang.co.kr/news, or download our smartphone app by searching Arirang TV. Do enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.